Welcome to the Natural History Cupboard. Come on in.
And welcome back to the Natural History Cupboard podcast, the place where the weird and wonderful parts of the natural world come together. I'm your host, Gareth, and I'm back.
I was going to say, I should be welcoming you back.
Yeah, you should, yeah. Well,
and welcome back, Gareth.
Thank you.
To the History Cupboard podcast.
You forgot how to actually say most of the lines and everything, because what the people didn't see is all the bits that had to be edited out of you and Drew trying to remember what I say every week, which was quite humorous.
So you're talking about the email section, but what was even funnier was the intro section, because I could remember the words that you're using, but every time I got so far into it, I'd get stuck on something, and there's a moth. I wonder if that came up the first bit of wildlife in the podcast, like in the podcast studio. I kept stopping. There's a lot of swearing in those outtakes.
But yeah, it was a bit of an interesting one last week, but it all came together in the end. So, Yep, we will continue on through the fire and the flames. So, that's what we do best. So,
hopefully the microphones are working better this week.
Well, definitely. So, you kind of know what I was up to last week. Spent a lot of time in hospital for the various different things. But the one good sort of thing that's that I've been able to do this last week, repaired the greenhouse.
Oh, cool.
After its very much storm battered appearance, and I've now got fruit and veg back in there, and then the garden's looking quite nice. That's what I've been doing.
Very good.
Not really much else, really. No, that's been pretty much it. I'm building a lot of stuff in the house, but What about you?
I've finally got the insulation down on the floor of my van, and I've started to put what will be the actual floor down now.
Nice.
But other than that, not much actual real world natural history stuff. What I have been playing quite a bit of this week is Path of Titans.
Okay.
I've actually managed to get some playtime on it. And that involved actually getting my daughter to play with me on it.
Nice.
Yeah, it was nice. She really enjoyed it. She wanted to be a dragon. I did have a go as a velociraptor, but she wanted to be a dragon, so I set that up for her. The wyvern thing.
Yeah.
What do they call it? Draco wyvern or whatever. Draco viper or something like that.
Yeah.
There's this pond, right? And she's the only creature around. She needed water. She went down to get some water, right?
Mm.
And this Hatzgopteryx came down, and it's just there. And they make different calls.
Yeah.
And you can make like the heart call is like a social call. And he made a friendly call. So like, I'll just let him know you're friendly as well. So made her do the heart call. And so they both started drinking, and then Hatzgopteryx stopped drinking prematurely, walked over and just pecked the hell out of this dragon. It flies off bleeding, and my daughter is just screaming. Get in my dragon.
That's very similar to how you and I got, completely and utterly griefed when we played it. He's being friendly. No, he's killing us. Okay.
Didn't he in our case, wasn't it like
brought some
Giganotosaurus that brought over some food for us, dumped it down in front of us, and when we tucked in, bang.
Don't trust people online, folks.
No.
It's just not worth it. Anyway, that's quite cool. I played a lot of Prehistoric Kingdom.
Oh, did you?
Because they've now released baby dinosaurs, and they grow up. So it's the way all those dinosaur games should be. You get to have them from little babies, and then they grow up.
That's the Zoo Builder one.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I had to get used to playing it again after not playing it for quite a while, but yeah, that was cool. So well, should we head into this week's news?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's the news!
Right, well, we're into this week's news. We're going to start things off with myself. And I've got one from BBC Yorkshire. It's to celebrate World Curlew Day, which was the other week. But a man has set off on a 53-mile walk dressed as a curlew.
No way.
So it's as good as it sounds. The man is dressed as a curlew. Brilliant. Those who know me well, I was eventually going to build a giant curlew and go for a walk in it, says the man who's done this. So yeah, brilliant. I wonder if he's managed to make it by now to the end of a 53 miles wherever he was going.
That sounds great, though.
Hmm.
So my first article comes to us from Forbes. The headline is, "We're releasing millions of birds. The ticks are thriving." So every summer, 57 million pheasants are released into the British countryside to be shot, a population whose biomass rivals all native breeding UK birds. Combined, that is.
Of course.
Among other issues that we always harp on about with the problem with pheasant shoots and grouse shoots, it's an archaic practice. We now understand that there is evidence to suggest that it is aiding the spread of Lyme disease.
Nice.
Basically, ticks from pheasant release sites were more than twice as likely to be host to the Borrelia bacteria, which causes this disease, and this complements the wider issue that shows patterns of rising Lyme disease infection across the UK and the Northern Hemisphere, where this kind of ridiculous practice is still
Well,
going
there you
on.
go. If you never ever needed a reason not to like the idea of pheasant hunting, there it is.
Often, yeah.
Goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
So we've got one sent in to us from Louise O'Leary, who sent us this fantastic one from Science Alert. 113 million-year-old hell ant discovered, oldest fossil ever. Now, I know that my mum will probably have heard that and gone, nope, and turned the episode off. My mum does not like ants. She was not a fan of many of the species of large, quite aggressive ant that we had in Australia. Nothing as bad as these guys, though.
There's only one ant I don't like. Ant and Deck.
Oh God!
Yeah.
So these ants lived during the Cretaceous period, and these insects have basically been fossilized in a chunk of limestone from Brazil, and they've been given the equally cool name of Hadiomorpha myricina, basically known as hell ants. So I think that's quite cool, and one of the earliest groups of social insects to have first appeared is the ants.
Did I hear that right? It had Hades in the name.
Yes.
That's very cool. So my next article comes to us from Bird Guides, and the headline is "Hedgehogs to be removed from the Outer Hebrides." So saving, I'm not sure how to pronounce this. You're our resident Scotsman, partially. Uist, is it?
Yeah.
So Saving Uist Nature has secured a £100,000 fund to aid in the live capture and safe removal of hedgehogs from the South Uist and Benbecula Islands, where they are not native and are actively damaging the ecosystem. The little critters are causing an environmental nuisance by eating the eggs of ground nesting birds, but this effort will see them caught up before being re-released onto the Scottish mainland, where they'll be an environmental hero.
Yeah, and there's we've introduced hedgehogs all around the world in weird places. New Zealand, one of them. I'll never get why someone thought, you know what this place needs?
Hedgehogs.
What anyway, humans were weird. So my final one comes from the BBC again, but this is the normal BBC. National flavored, I don't know, call it whatever you want. Historic dinosaur models, part of a £22 million park upgrade, and that's the Crystal Palace dinosaurs, the absolutely stunning first bits of paleo art, essentially getting a revamp. The whole park itself, which the Crystal Palace dinosaurs are Grade 1 listed sculptures. They are basically going to get a restoration. And they've sadly needed it for quite a while. Some of them have been patched up in various different places. I mean, I bet you if you asked Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins, who made these back in the Victorian era, did he think they'd still be around today? I bet he probably wouldn't have thought they would be.
No.
But it's amazing to see that they are, still there, and they're set to get a restoration. So part of the restoration is going to allow for the dinosaurs to obviously be restored, but there is going to be a visitor centre and a dinosaur-themed playground in the area to basically aid as a community centre and cafe. So
That's cool.
that's nice to see, get people involved in the area.
Very much so. And my final headline for this episode, this one comes to us from Louise O'Leary as well. So thank you very much for sending in two really great articles. It comes to us from Live Science. Giant sea dragon fossil could be the largest mosasaur ever discovered in the Mississippi.
Nice.
Yeah, I love a mosasaur.
A Mississippi mosasaur.
A Mississippi mosasaur, yeah. Yeah. Researchers have pulled what could be the largest mosasaur to have ever been found in the Mississippi out of the bank of the riverbed just south of Sackville.
Is that where the Sackville Banks has come from?
Literally, as I said that out loud, I thought, hang on. The specimen currently consists solely of one vertebra, but from that vertebra, paleontologists can infer a size of at least 9 meters. So that's
Nice.
30 foot long for you guys across the pond. So that
Big
is
old animal.
pretty big, yeah. But that just about wraps it up for this week's news reel, headline reel, that is. If you, like Louise O'Leary, have things that you'd like us to cover, send them on in to us in any of the usual ways, and you might see it covered either in the newsreel or in this bit, the main article. And this week's main article comes to us from the Liverpool Echo. And the headline is UK wildlife under threat as 88% of people concerned about decline. Biodiversity and ecology consultants ArbTech have just compiled a report called the British Wildlife Insights 2025. The results show that just under 9 out of 10 people, so 88% roughly, of those surveyed were concerned by wildlife decline. But of those surveyed, just a third, 33%, of them admitted they do nothing to help curb the worrying trend in their local areas. And what's worse, 13% shared that they have absolutely no inclination to do anything about it whatsoever, ever. Which is
I bet you those numbers would be slightly underrepresentative as well. I bet you there'd be more people who would be afraid to say either of those two things and just didn't mention it.
Now, contrary to how we normally run this segment, I'm actually not going to reiterate the article as much. You now know where to get it and what the headline is. Most of you can surmise that this article will detail the depressing yet inevitable conclusion that there is a serious and damaging disconnect between the British public and our native wildlife. So instead, let's talk about how we can change, maybe cover some things that Gareth and I do, and suggest ways in which the two of us and you guys at home can update and increase our efforts through 2025. So one of the main things you can do is provide shelter. This could be as simple as not touching your compost heaps until after the grass snake's hatching period is through, if you live in that kind of area. But eco-friendly, sustainably sourced bird boxes are also a very good start. There are also some companies that even use 100% recycled plastic for this purpose. So that's plastic being recycled instead of just binned off somewhere, and it's weatherproof and probably long-lasting too. Hedgehog houses and bat nest boxes to help our friendly neighbourhood pest control rest easy as well are also equally good places to start. Now, you could also stack bricks safely in one corner of the garden, or maybe a more elaborate bug hotel type thing that will provide respite for the invertebrates in your area. There's another good shout. Apart from the protection offered by shelter, group together with your neighbours to create wildlife corridors, so you can cut gaps in the bottoms of fences to allow hedgehogs to traverse through their territory with ease and make the predators stalking them a lot more, like domestic cats, a lot more difficult. You can also provide feeding opportunities, so bird feeders, feeders that specifically target red squirrels. But if you do that in an area, in one of those areas where there is a bit of crossover between greys and reds, just make sure that you keep it sanitized, you keep it clean, just to prevent squirrel pox from spreading further into the red squirrel population, because that is something we don't want to happen.
Yeah.
Wildflower protocols and arrangements. So how you kind of cater to wildflowers in your garden, because they feed, especially early on in the year, they feed all the your bees and your butterflies and such.
And it's not always about having specifically native ones. It's nice to have native stuff, but if you've got flowers that will come out early and feed the bees,
Mm.
and they're from a different part of the world and are not invasive, they're still going to be beneficial to our native insects, giving them food.
So non-invasive exotics that will stay in your garden and
It'll
not
still look
spread
nice
further.
as well.
Fruit bearing plant life is also good for birds and such. Safe drinking opportunities like bird baths that are out the reach of domestic cats and dogs, because you don't want to you don't want to set a trap by accident. And now we kind of move on into the dreaded political options. So you can start by voting for people that put the environment first. Hard to do given the options that we have here in the UK and presumably what you guys have got over there in America, but we can try our best. And then there's other places around the world that have actually had it a little bit better than us, with governments that are a little bit more forward thinking on that. But what's a whole lot easier than trying to vote in a government, especially with the political trends going the way they are right now, is communicating your concerns and desires to your local MP. Are rewilding studies occurring locally? Are they considering the reintroduction of lost native fauna? Well, get involved, write letters, compile petitions, let the benefits of pine martens and beavers be sung loudly, and let your MP know that you and others in your area support the return of these species.
And saying that, you can then start to see the effects.
Yeah.
Just this week, there was a photo of a pine marten at Woolacombe Beach, which just
on 2 different days, I believe.
Yeah, adding to the fact they're back. They're back in a lot of these areas.
Yeah.
You know,
so that's really good. In actual fact, this week there's been photos of beavers in certain areas as well. So again, really good stuff. Similarly, forbid the hunt from accessing any land that you might own. If you own land, don't let them on. Make it known that they're not allowed on, and then make your MP aware of your objection to the whole pheasant and grouse shooting nonsense. And on that note, in the past we've not really said much about them, but screw it, I'm going to say it. Join a SAB group if you're up for that. Other things you can do is try to leave no trace in your local area. So pick up any litter you see in your cul-de-sac, if that's what you live in, or in your local neighborhood, even if it's not yours. It might be small, but this is a dent, and others may be inspired to join your efforts. Arranging a beach clean, from experience, this is an incredibly difficult thing to do. So when someone is advertising one, join it. It's much easier. Just join ones that are already going. There are so many kind of small ways in which we can help, ways we can, as I say, make little dents. Gareth, what are some of the ways in which you try to help wildlife in your garden? I know we've both spoken about it before, but let's use this opportunity to sing it loud.
Well, I've got a pond, although nothing's living in it at the moment. So I'm putting that down to lack of interest from the animals. They've evidently got somewhere better to be going. So that's fine. It's there. If anything, it probably means the local cat has probably got something to drink, because I've seen him occasionally down the bottom of the garden, which is not great. If it were up to me, I would have it so that the cats couldn't get into my garden, because they're not my cats. I don't want them in my garden. I don't currently have any bird feeders up, although I used to have them out all the time. However, we did find that we attracted a lot of rats.
Yes.
Which was a real issue. So a bit of a trade-off. There's always water there, but we don't always provide food. The key to that is being consistent. If you're consistently feeding, that's fine, because it becomes a source where the birds can come to. If you're not feeding and providing water, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
I do feel bad about not putting food out, but at the same time, I've got a lot of fruit bushes and things in my garden, so the birds have got an opportunity to be able to get to that. I'm not someone who gets incredibly jealous if the birds come and eat some of my raspberries or blackberries later in the year. I'm not going to have a problem with that. But I know if I was to put out food for the birds, I'd probably end up with rats there also eating fruit as well.
Not every solution is for everyone.
No.
And in fact, sorry to cut you off, but a really good resource for this is your if you're in the UK at least, your local Counties Wildlife Trust, because
Yeah.
on there you can look up what was it called? The Wild Gardens Award, which we covered last year. It's really good, and it will give you loads of options that you can go through. And you only have to select a couple from each
Category.
category.
Yeah.
Thank you. To get a nice little plaque to go in your garden to show
Not
off to
done
neighbours.
that. I should do.
No, I want to do it as well. I keep meaning to.
The big thing that I do have is I've got a rockery that has got a hibernaculum built into it. I made specifically sure that when I put that rockery there, I dug down and made a hibernaculum, so there is a good amount of space there. And also a good chunk of the garden itself is where I've got a lot of my plants, but it's quite covered in now.
Mhm.
So it's quite hidden for animals to be able to move in and around there. And then the area that does have lawn, the edges are all wildflowers. So I do cut the grass, but it's not much grass anyway. It's a pretty rubbish lawn. But it's usually just the one spot where people can sit during the summer months, and then it becomes a bog as soon as it rains. So essentially, I've got the best of both worlds. I've got the wildflowers around the outside for all the pollinating insects, specifically planted in there for them, and then in the center, a lawn. So you can have the best of both worlds. You don't have to have one or the other. I know we quite often talk about no mow May, and I try and mow the grass there as late as possible. That's for a variety of reasons. One being that it takes ages for that ground to dry out, and two, I want to obviously give the pollinators as best a chance. But I've been trying to put in as much stuff around the edges so that I can then mow that lawn. So it doesn't have to be one or the other. The other thing I've got is, I've still yet to put it up, mostly because I do not possess a ladder. Animals are afraid of heights, so it's not really my sort of thing for putting it up. But I've got bat boxes that I want to put up.
Yes, I remember you saying.
We do get bats at the back of ours, and I want to provide extra housing for them. I want to get sparrow boxes and swift boxes and all of that, but yeah, it's getting them up there is the issue at the moment. I don't fancy hanging out the window to try and do it. But they're probably the biggest things I'd say I do. I don't get time to do beach cleans and stuff like that with a full-time job and kids and everything. And it's something that not everyone can do. If you've got the time to go and do it, go and do it.
As I say, not every solution is for everyone.
Yeah, but if everyone does a little bit, it all helps in the long run.
Yeah.
I have tried talking to neighbours on either side about doing holes in the fence for hedgehogs and that. But the good thing about a lot of the gardens that we have in our sort of street, because we all back onto a forest, most of the gardens have actually got a wire fence at the back, so the hedgehogs can come in and out and go into the forest to access each other's gardens. So not as much of an issue, but I've tried to make people aware of things like that when it comes to cats and dogs as well. So yeah.
For me, one of my favorite things, because it's the thing that I saw the biggest and quickest kind of consequence to, was you talk about no mow May. I don't mow. I'll give it one last mow right at the end of like the summer, end of autumn, before it gets too wet, and then I will leave it right up until May, June, sometimes even July.
Why make it hard for yourself,
And then we will mow the front lawn first, because we use that the most. In fact, that one's only just been mown a day ago for the first time since last year. The back garden will stay unmown for probably at least another month or so, into June, late June-ish, probably. And what I've seen as a result of that, which I've said on the podcast before, is the first year was a influx of invertebrate life of all kinds. The second year, even though there's, to my knowledge, no one around here has a pond, so the closest water source is a river, which for me is a 2-minute walk down there. So
for a frog,
it's
it
not
would
big,
be a
but
year.
Yeah, for a frog, that's a long way. But an influx of amphibians in the garden now, as a result of the bugs, I suspect. and also bird life. Bird life exploded in that second and third year, to the point that we had the only house martin nest in our street that was active every year. Since we started doing this, there's 3 along this row of houses, and you see all of them coming to our garden eating
That's good.
the insects around there. So that's my favorite thing. So yeah, it's just really nice to be able to see that. Also, more
Yeah.
bats as a result. So allow me to list 3 ways in which I can improve on my current efforts. So once those 6 months are up, and the garden is then, as I say, the 6 months over winter is up, and the garden is then for my family, so to speak. I think I can foresee me this year trying to create some flower beds where once the lawn is mown, as you said, there's still a dedicated space for wildflowers. Especially if I could get like some sort of year-round cultivation going, that would be cool. I could also do a better job of bird feeders and drinking opportunities because I don't really have any.
Yeah.
Same goes for nest boxes as well. So that's kind of a priority this year, especially hedgehogs. You've already kind of said about what your next steps are. So with your nest boxes and such. So I guess in closing, there's lots that could be done. It's just often hard to take that first step. So maybe someone listening to this who is struggling with that first step,
Just give it a go.
Yeah, you might be able to take something from what we said, or better yet, if any one of you at home has made those steps or has done something, shout it out, put it in the comments section, and let other people know so they know. And for you guys in America, I said that it's not much use to you, but actually it would be if you went on to Devon Wildlife Trusts or Devon Wildlife Trust and look up the Wilder Gardens Award. You could get some ideas there that will definitely be transferable. So yeah. So that's that.
That's really cool. Well, should we head into this week's creature feature?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's the creature feature.
Right, well, we're into our creature feature for this week, and we'll be revisiting Mongolia somewhat. It's a place that we visited many times before, actually, in fairly recent episodes as well. We've looked at many dinosaurs from there, like Protoceratops, Velociraptor, Linharaptor, Oviraptor, Dinochirus is technically from there.
Raptor.
Basically, there's a lot of things.
Mongolia raptor.
Be quiet. Technically, we could also include a lot of the other animals like Daedon or Entelodonts are also from there. Calicotheres are also another thing that's from there. And modern day animals like the gerbil.
I was about to say, yeah, that was the one I was about to say.
We could also have Jerboa in there, probably. But this time, we are going to meet an animal that is considerably larger than a gerbil. In fact, it's the largest land mammal to have ever walked the earth. A hornless rhino that would have easily held its own if you'd have mixed it in with some of the larger species of dinosaur. This is Paraceratherium. And to quote one of my favorite documentaries, and basically my introduction to this animal as a child, Walking with Beasts, life on land will never be this big again.
I remember that, yeah.
I loved that episode. And in fact, I rewatched it the other day. If you're in the UK and you have BBC iPlayer, it's on there at the moment. I've rewatched it. But first off, we need to cover what it's called, because this is an animal that you may have called a variety of different names. Also, depending on where you are in the world, might also dictate what you call this animal. So we need to clear up what exactly it's called. So there are many different names for this mighty Mongolian mammal, but we're going to go through the many other names and where they come into the story of the animal being discovered in a second. But first off, Paraceratherium transoralicum, which is the type species, essentially means, or the Paraceratherium part means near hornless beast. Anything with therium on essentially means beast. So it is a species of hornless rhino. Basically think tapirs, but much, much bigger. And it is the second half of its name, the transuraliscum, essentially is describing the fact that it comes from beyond the west of the Urals.
Right.
The Ural Mountains being a mountain range that essentially separates east and west.
Mhm.
But that's essentially where the name comes from. However, the many other names of this animal that it's been called over the 100 years or so since its discovery are many and varied. And I
Okay.
would say that some of them you'll probably recognize. So let's have a look at its discovery and the names that it's had over time. So in 1846, Paraceratherium is named. Unidentified fragmentary fossils were discovered in the Dera Bugti area of Pakistan around the turn of the century. I've probably butchered that, by the way. British paleontologists, including Pilgrim and Forrester Cooper, explored the Dera Bugti area, and after finding more pieces of this animal, they decided to name it Paraceratherium bugtiensis. So basically, from that area.
Yeah.
And that was the original name that it was known as. And when I say fragmentary, for such a large animal, and we'll get onto the size of this animal in a minute, the remains of it are remarkably fragmentary over such a huge area. So in 1915, another name is added, Indrincatherium, which you may be familiar
I'm familiar with Indrincatherium, yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, I believe in Walking with Beasts, sorry, they refer to it as an Indrincathere, which is what I originally called these animals as well, until weirdly playing the game Ark, where it called them Paraceratheriums or Paracers or whatever, because people couldn't be bothered to say the full word. They just shortened everything.
If I remember right, when we first started playing that game, you were still in that transition stage where you
referring
kept
to them as an
switching them back and
Indrincathere.
forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is kind of why I like the word Indrincathere, because it has more significance to it to an extent. So Russian paleontologists in Kazakhstan found a nearly complete skeleton, which was named Indrincatherium transilicorium. So the Indrink beast west of the Urals. So that's where we get the other bit. But the Indrink part, or Indrincatherium, so Indrink beast, is basically a mythical Slavic creature, which is described in a book called the Dove Book of Russian folklore. It describes the animal as a fabulous beast. Essentially, think of it like a unicorn in some ways. Is the king of all animals who lives on a mountain known as the Holy Mountain, where no other foot may tread. When it wakes up and stirs, the earth apparently trembles. And the word Indrink is basically a distorted version of the Russian word for unicorn.
All right.
As it's described as a gigantic bull with legs of a deer and the head of a horse, and an enormous horn sticking out of its snout. Now, minus the horn, you could very much describe Indrincatherium or Paraceratherium as a huge, huge bull with the legs of a deer and the head of a horse.
Yeah.
It kind of is. But this is also where that name gets tied into Elasmotherium and a lot of the other prehistoric rhino relatives, known as the Russian unicorn, essentially that massive one-horned rhino.
Almost like a Y-shaped.
No, that's a Brontothere, which is slightly different.
Right, yeah.
But so it gets the name from this mythical Slavic creature, which I really like the idea of.
Cool, yeah.
And I love it when folklore plays into it.
Not too far off of the description, either, is it?
And it wouldn't take much to think, okay, at some point someone's found a complete skeleton of these and put two and two together and come up with that. So in a way, it's very close to the truth. So in 1922, Roy Chapman Andrews joins the chat, shall we say? So American explorer and paleontologist Henry Fairfield Osborn sends also noted Roy Chapman Andrews, the explorer and original Indiana Jones, to the Gobi Desert to look for fossil fragments. And amongst many of the finds that they find on that trip, including Protoceratops being one of them, and I would say check out the episode that we did on that. In fact, I'm going to try and include the link here. In fact, we'll put it in the animal's mouth. We'll put it in here. If I'm good enough at the edit, that's where that will go. If not, find that one. I will certainly link it in the show notes. But yes, we talked about in that episode, Roy Chapman Andrews finding a lot of these bits for Paraceratherium at the time, as well as a multitude of other things on that trip. So amongst the countless bones that were found of partial specimens, there were some amazing discoveries. One of them in 1922 was one of the most complete Paraceratherium skulls, and it's down as the American Museum of Natural History, so AMNH 18650.
Mm-hmm.
Another find that I think is almost more impressive is 4 giant legs, all sticking straight up out of the mud of the animal that had basically sadly perished and been preserved its last pose when it had presumably died in like a
very cartoony way.
Not sticking straight up, sticking down.
Oh,
so the animal.
I was imagining the Paraceratherium just kind of dying and then going, like in a cartoon, like rigor mortis in a cartoon.
No, imagine basically coming across what looks like 4 posts driven into the ground that are giant leg bones.
That's amazing.
And the poor animal had obviously died stuck in the mud many, many millions of years ago, and preserving its last pose from the knees downwards, at least. So, one of the most amazing sort of fossil finds of this animal. So, move forward a year. In 1923, we get Paraceratherium being coined as well by Henry Fairfield Osborn, as he discovers some massive bones in Baluchistan, in a region in Pakistan, and coins the name Paraceratherium, basically beast of Baluchistan. So, as with all of these finds, they were thought to be different genera, and due to the fragmentary nature of their remains. But now we understand these to be the same animal. And so why the confusion? It's for a few fairly big reasons, to be honest. The remoteness of most of these sites being one. There is also a tendency at this time to name the animal first, then carry out the research and check to see if people have already discovered it afterwards. Think of the bone wars, think of all of the different animals that got named, and then people went back on them.
Funnily enough, this is kind of what happened with direwolves as well.
There's
a lot of kind of
get
similar...
the fossil first, then describe it whenever.
They actually named it the same name because they're in such a rush. They named it the same name as they'd named Dole at that time, but then both animals had their scientific names changed.
Well, there you go. So without checking with others to see if anyone had found anything similar and seeing whether this is in fact the same animal. This is made worse by the fact that there wasn't much cooperation or communication between international institutes at this period of time, as much as there is today. There's still quite a disparity with some places talking to each other, but even institutes in different parts of the world will try and cooperate to an extent, because they know that there's more to be learned working together. So it leads to a sort of compartmentalizing of knowledge and people coming up with their own theories in isolation of each other. Either way, this leads to these animals going by many different names, and dependent on where you are in the world, for a long time, Paraceratherium was one of many, many names. But it is nowadays, Paraceratherium is the accepted name for this animal in scientific literature, but it's taken a very long time for it to get to this point. And like you said earlier, I was still referring to these as Indrincotherium, because it was only within the last 20 or 30 years that these animals have basically been formalized as just Paraceratherium.
I'm certain I remember at least a few short days of me thinking that you're talking about two different animals when I first started joining you on Ark.
It's trying to kill you. Yeah, they would trash things, but they were one of my favorites. So it depends on where you are in the world. It depends on what scientific literature you're reading, but you may still hear Indrincotherium if you're in Russia or Eastern Europe, or references in the Walking with Beasts series, which is what I called these animals for the longest time. I personally think, based on the folklore attached to it, I think it sounds cooler.
Yeah,
and I prefer it as a name. But what are you going to do? So Paraceratherium is the older sort of name for these animals in American sources, and you tend to find that sort of 1960s, 1970s sort of pop art of these animals is what they'll refer to them as, because that was that sort of key time as well. So what exactly is this animal? We've been talking about it for quite a bit, but what on earth is it?
So let's look at Paraceratherium. The Paracerathers were a genus of hornless rhinos, giant rhinos that lived during the Oligocene periods, so 34 to 23 million years ago. But their start was much earlier in the Eocene period. We'll get on to looking at that later. The exact size of this animal is actually really hard to know for the simple reason we don't have complete specimens of them, so their sizes are essentially estimated, but they are whoppers anyway. When it comes to shoulder height for this animal, it's 4.8 meters to the shoulder. That is a pretty impressive animal. They are overall length of about 7.4 meters from nose to tail, and as you can see, they are big. These are animals that have incredibly large pillar-like legs to be able to hold up their massive bulk. Their weight was somewhere between 15 to 20 tons in weight. To give you an idea of how heavy that is, that's roughly the weight of a sei whale or a whale shark. So, pretty hefty animal. Now, these are animals that essentially grew very big, very fast. When they reached adulthood, these animals were essentially in a niche of their own. No other animals were able to feed at the same height that these guys could. They were able to just feed and graze, and the only competition they had was from other Paraceratheriums. So, a pretty impressive animal. Let's head back to the studio.
So where on earth did this creature live? As we've discussed, it comes from places like Kazakhstan, Pakistan, Mongolia. It's a wide variety of different places. But during the Oligocene epoch, the world was cooling and drying after the warm, lush Eocene period. So we're starting to see the disappearance of the lush tropical rainforest habitats in a lot of places that are being replaced with open woodlands, savanna-like grassland, and in some areas you still had rather lush forests, but think more southern Spain, sort of
Very nice.
nice temperate sort of weather, a lot more grasslands, but a lot of open deciduous forests and tropical forest, subtropical forests as well. A pretty nice place to visit. However, there's a lot of animals that could still do a lot of damage, so probably not the best place to go in some aspects. But yeah, basically, this opening up of the landscape forced a lot of species to evolve to benefit from these much more open areas, and Paraceratherium is no exception. Like I say, the genus has been around since the Eocene, and they'd started to take advantage of the forests for a long period of time. But when they essentially came into these habitats in the Oligocene, they grew big and they grew tall, which meant that they could roam over vast areas of Central Asia, including modern-day Pakistan, India, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, China, Mongolia. Basically, this huge range where these different subspecies and species of Paraceratherium can be found. The habitats were vast across those areas, from sort of semi-arid deserts to more tropical places. So the size of the range helps explain the disparity when it comes to finding bits of these animals, and also the range of names as well for this animal. And this region back then wasn't all desert or dry steppe like it is today. It was a mosaic of habitats. So you would have found all sorts of things, from open woodlands, floodplains, river valleys, presumably mud in at least the Mongolian side.
Yep.
Seasonal grasslands as well would have been caused by seasonal rivers that would have carved fertile valleys through a lot of these places, that would have provided tall grasses, leafy vegetation. A lot of the animals would have also moved seasonally with the food that is available, a lot like animals already do today. So growing on this diet of leaves, they would have been able to get to decent sizes, like I say, 15 to 20 tons as fully grown animals. And when they were fully grown, there's not much that could touch them in the slightest. Even the largest predators around at this time, things like entelodonts and hyenodons, would have only posed a threat to the sick, the old, or babies.
Yeah.
A full-grown, healthy adult could have easily stomped one of these guys out of the way, and probably did in many cases, I'd imagine. When it comes to amounts that these guys would have eaten, it's estimated that they would have eaten anywhere between 100 to 200 kilos of leaves a day
Wow.
to fuel themselves. You worked with elephants, Aaron.
Briefly, yeah.
How much food do you reckon you gave them on a day?
Jiminy Cricket. I can't remember off the top of my head how
No.
much the team gave them.
Basically, this is quite a bit more. So,
Mm.
yeah. So these animals survived for an incredibly long period. Basically, the undisputed kings of Mongolia and many parts of Central Asia, but they did go extinct. Otherwise, we would have some really cool animals roaming those parts of the world today. I mean, we do, but just not these. So, unlike most mammals, climate change and resulting habitat distribution may have had a bit of an issue on them, but it's not the sole reason why these guys may have gone extinct. It's obviously not helped with the world changing and becoming, in a lot of those places, a lot drier and a lot more open. But it's not the sole reason, and it's not humans, because humans haven't even evolved yet.
Right.
So, what on earth was it? Well, these massive rhinos first appeared during the Eocene, a time when the Earth's climate was significantly warmer and wetter. They thrived in these lush forested environments. However, towards the end of the Eocene and into the Oligocene, Earth experienced its first major cooling event in over 100 million years.
Wow.
Basically, the last time the Earth was as cool as this, the dinosaurs were still around.
This was one of those
Probably
glacial periods of the Ice Age then.
not that much. We're talking some cooling, but we're not talking massive amounts.
Not drastic.
No. Glaciers and polar ice caps did began forming, as well as sea levels dropping. It's basically as Antarctica starts to move further south and starts to become what it is today.
Right, okay.
We also start to see, because of that, drying up of areas, and we start to see ice forming at the caps, the polar ice caps again. Which, like I said, the last time that happened was when the dinosaurs roamed the planet, but even then it was only a small amount. So as a result, the planet became a lot drier. In Asia, the semi-tropical forests were replaced by more and more scrubland and savanna, like I was saying, opening up these environments. But despite these changes, the Paraceratherium basically appeared to adapt and even thrive throughout the Oligocene. They essentially had more forest for them to be able to move through, but bigger gaps that they could do it. So they likely roamed across these vast distances, seeking out isolated woodlands, feeding from these trees at a height that no other animal could reach them. And this resilience suggested that climate change and habitat shifts were not the main driver to their extinction. So what on earth led to this extinction? Well, a surprising factor might actually be the reason why they disappeared. One hypothesis presented points out the arrival of elephants.
Oh, yeah.
Now, towards the end of the Oligocene and into the Miocene period, Asia saw the migration of some of the early elephants from Africa, mainly the gomphotheres, which are some of the oddest looking elephants you'll ever come across. They're the ones that have got big shovel-shaped
with
mouths.
the two teeth and the
They look weird. But these elephants were mixed, capable feeders. They were basically able to consume tougher plant material, including tree bark, which modern-day elephants also eat as well. Now, they would have shared much of the same habitats as the Paraceratheriums and would have likely stripped a lot of the trees of the bark, ultimately killing a lot of the trees whilst they moved into some of these areas. Also, much like modern elephants, these prehistoric relatives may have drastically altered the environment, turning sparse woodlands into open scrubland and grassland by basically knocking the trees down.
Oh, dear.
So elephants do this as a matter of course today. It's why the savannah of Africa is the savannah of Africa in a lot of ways.
They are the original deforesters.
Yeah, but it's part of their ecosystem, and when a new animal moves in
as well.
Yeah, when they move into a new area, however, this impacts a lot of other creatures. So, with the food source further reduced, populations likely declined, and it may have been no coincidence that the extinction closely followed the arrivals of the gomphotheres into Asia. sadly bringing to an end the reign of the largest land mammal to have ever existed on the planet. And I personally think one of the coolest mammals to have ever
It is a
existed
cool
on the
animal,
planet.
yeah.
So yeah, I did say to you before we started recording that you may dislike elephants at the end of this. Do you dislike elephants? Have they
What's the correct way of
tainted it a little
wording
bit?
this?
No?
Nature selected Paraceratherium
Ah,
for extinction. Paraceratherium had their shot.
wow. Well, there you go. A really cool mammal, and
Yes.
technically the largest land mammal. So we've covered the largest marine mammal, the largest land mammal. Yeah, we've got the two largest mammals there. So there you go. Should we move into our emails?
Yeah. Yes, we should.
Only if you're sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. Let's do it. Quick.
Bing! You've got mail. Ooh, it's an email.
Right, well, we're into this week's emails. We're going to take a look at the question from last week.
Mhm.
So I put this one mostly knowing that, well, it was going to be an interesting creature feature and also an animal that is in the news, shall we say. So it was, what is your thoughts on the direwolf? And that was opened up to whether you wanted the extinct, the de-extincted, the whatever,
Game of
basically.
Thrones, whatever. I tell you what, my thoughts are after doing the direwolf news, after doing the direwolf creature feature, and then after when everything went wrong and I did that little kind of
Fixing edit, yeah.
fixing edit, and I mentioned some things that were either missed out or have since become the. I actually never want to talk about in fact, I never want to see a direwolf.
Fair enough.
I'll make them extinct again.
Well, anyway,
I won't.
Aaron's opinion aside, Jan Ashbridge has started things off by saying, not sure it's a real direwolf, but it's an interesting use of the technology available one step further to the benefit of other species.
You're right on all
Question?
three counts.
Yeah.
All three counts are right. Yeah. Spencer Seams says mixed thoughts, but leans towards the positive. This can revolutionize and influence so much. Condors can come back. Condors. If I did condors, no one would have a problem. Major corporations getting involved in this will be the make or break point. We're far from Jurassic Park, but it's not entirely out of the question.
Well, let's send Sam Neill and Ian Malcolm. I mixed up to the
Sam Neill.
Sam Neill and Jeff Goldblum. Sorry, there we go. And I can't remember the actress who plays Ellie Sattler.
Laura
Dern. Yeah. Anyway, Ash Johnson has said it's cool and all that, but it's not a true direwolf. Which is fair enough.
It's true.
Yeah.
And then Kelsey Watt says Alanis Morissette. Ironic, isn't it? Ironic that's. You're not expecting me to sing that, I hope.
Isn't that ironic?
Isn't it ironic that some parts of the world are culling wolves and the other part is bringing a kind of wolf back? Yeah.
Actually, if you're going to use anything at this point, you need to have edited in the ironic.
Ironic. He can save the direwolves from extinction, but not the grey.
Let me tell you the tragic tale of Darth Direwolf the Wise.
Of Wolf Dog the Red.
Anyway.
I think there's a lot. There is a kind of a common thread through this. Certainly the whole is it a true direwolf thing. I think we've kind of
covered that.
Yeah, and
yeah.
As soon as I say something new on it, there'll be something new to come up with.
I'm sure more
like a laptop or a Spinosaurus
come around. Oh yes, well we'll get to Spinosaurus.
Let's just let all the dust settle before we mention them again.
So there we go. That's at least our Facebook comments for that question this week, or last week, sorry. So this week's question, based on the fact that we have looked at Paraceratherium, we've looked at the gerbil, the jerboa, Protoceratops, Velociraptor, all of these different Mongolian creatures. It got me thinking, what's your favorite Mongolian creature? It doesn't have to be any of the ones that we've talked about, but it's a region of the world that has a lot of interesting things in it, and And we always seem to come back there at some point or another.
We do visit
One of those
Mongolia a lot.
regions of the world that we seem to have done an awful lot on. So what's your favorite Mongolian species, Aaron? It's a tough one.
Do you know what? It is a tough one because there's so many cool animals that have come out of there. And yet, Mongolia is such an interesting place as well. It's a place that it hasn't changed all that much in such a long time, like an almost unfathomable amount of time when you talk about
Still being
deep
quite
time.
deserty. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you've got these prehistoric animals being recovered there that are just amazing. And then the animals that survive there today, the cultures that thrive there today, just such an interesting place. I'd love to go to Mongolia. I think I'm gonna have to say it because I'm wearing it. And
Raptor
exquisitus.
Fair enough.
Very
Well,
cool.
Mine also ends in raptor, and it's one that I will definitely do as a creature feature. I'm going to try and fit it in this year, and that is Gigantoraptor.
Oh, I was thinking, hang on, you've done Velociraptor.
Yeah. So when it comes to, I mean, it's not a raptor in the same sense as Linharaptor, but it is essentially an oviraptorid. It's the biggest of all of them, and it's a monster of a creature.
It is a chonker, isn't it?
It's basically like somebody went, oh, I like this sort of turkey little creature. Let's dial it up to 12 and just make this thing terrifying, because in itself, it's a pretty non-terrifying creature if you were to have it as the same size as any of these other oviraptorids. But the moment,
I wouldn't like to get bitten by one.
It'd be a nasty bite. But you dial this thing up to the fact that it's got a skull bigger than this skull here, it would be an animal that could just snip your arm off like nothing.
I was going to say, that beak
snip
at
you
that
in two.
size.
Yeah. It's got huge hooked claws as well, so it could have very easily just grabbed anything and taken a horrifying crunching bite off it.
Have you seen? I forget the name of the film, but it's really good. It's a Welsh military werewolf movie. I can't remember what it's called.
Do you mean Dog Soldiers?
Dog Soldiers. That's it.
That's in Scotland.
Is it? I thought it was in Wales. We can't claim that one. Oh well. When the werewolf attacks him and his belly's split open, and he says, "Oh, sausages!" because he's in shock. That's what came to my mind when you said about being split in two by this Gigantoraptor's beak.
As it just chomps you in two like a biscuit. But yeah, and it stood taller than the largest carnivorous dinosaur around at the time, Tarbosaurus, which is basically the Asian T-Rex.
Yeah.
You know, this is an animal that is impressive, and I will cover it at some point.
I think it needs to be covered. That's a cool one.
Yeah,
I genuinely had forgotten about that one. And,
I mean, you could even pick Dinocaris, the one that's one.
No, Dinocaris has been picked enough. It's been picked enough.
It's so special; it needs to be picked again. Anyway, so let us know what your thoughts on that are on our Facebook or on our YouTube page, to basically tell us which you think is the coolest animal. We've both gone for extinct, but there are many extant species that live there that are really quite cool as well. Camels, gerbils. There's at least 3 or 4 different kinds of quite interesting spider and scorpion that I can think of. But yeah, so we'll move swiftly into our YouTube comments, which has also got some people's thoughts on the direwolf. So Aaron, what have we got from the YouTube peoples? So
the YouTube peoples will start off with Rose Lee 9961, who says, for this week's question of my thoughts on the direwolf, I'll try to hit multiple nails on the head with my answers. Are those nails going into direwolves? I shouldn't say things like that.
You're not meant to come out of these things disliking the creature. I really like
direwolves, like actual direwolves and fantasy direwolves. But that has been the last few weeks have been very exciting from a scientific standpoint, but from a science translating or science educating standpoint, the purposes of this podcast
kind of killed your passion for it.
No, it's just giving me this like migraine. Every time someone says direwolf, my brain twitches. It vibrates like that.
Oh well.
Rose Lee continues. I think true direwolves are cool, not cooler than the other extinct predators of North America. However, they were another large predator that filled a similar niche to grey wolves while they were still around. That's super cool. For the creature feature, I think it was good, minus the hiccups in the road, which will all hopefully be smoothed out soon. It was a good one. For what Colossal has done, it's really only caused hurt to me and potentially others. Hurt? The marketing campaign on this the marketing campaign on this has sold a false idea to people and feels like a thing for the ultra rich. I see what you're saying with the hurt now. With the direwolves pulling a lot of similarities to ones made by George R. R. Martin, to him even taking a picture with one feeling like a designer-made pet. The marketing has been terrible.
Yeah.
It has been atrocious. I sympathize with the actual scientists and their breakthrough, because it's kind of getting buried underneath how terrible this marketing has been. And that's on them. Not necessarily on the scientists, but certainly on the same company. And it's caused confusion, I feel. Yeah. Lots of people are saying, why bring back species when others are dying? We'll circle back to that in a minute. They are putting the spotlight on this rather than projects people would like to see that actually that they are actually doing too. They have to play the money game, and it's one that sucks. Also, it's all starting to feel like Jurassic Park a bit. This hidden secret direwolf project and controversy over what it means to bring something back. On to how I found you guys. I think it was a combo of fate and the algorithm pushing me to you guys. I was at that time consuming a lot of the Common Descent podcast, but was falling out of it a little bit. When went searching for other nature-related podcasts, didn't see one that caught my eye. Then some time had passed, and
You were asking about the Jaguar aspect of this the other day.
and your page on YouTube saw you guys recently released the Jaguar episode. I said, why not? And dove right in and loved it ever since.
Oh.
I've consumed all episodes from 2024 and 2025. You've done pretty well then. And about half of 2023. No, you've done really well then.
Gone backwards.
Yeah. Possibly don't go all the way back to episode 1 and 2, because they're a bit shaky. Still got a lot to go, but I'm ready for it all. Keep up the great work, and good to always see Drew in the studio. Missing Gareth though.
Only gone for a week.
He's only gone for a week, but we missed him too.
Thank you.
Podcast suffered.
See what happens when I'm not here.
To be fair, it partially suffered because of him not charging things, but there we go. So I wanted to circle back to something you said. Putting spotlight on this rather than like other conservation of extant species. I agree in part, because one of my problems as a zookeeper and with as a pro functional good zoo advocate that I would describe myself as, I have a similar problem with meerkats. Why are we keeping meerkats in every single zoo when there are other mongoose species that are struggling way more? Meerkats are common as muck in the wild, and they're common as muck in captivity. There's no need for them to be there. With this direwolf thing, I will say that the marketing has been bad all round. It wasn't a secret direwolf project as such. It was just that they'd not spoken. It was on their website, but it wasn't spoken about as much as the other ones. And I think it's because this was actually partially a proof of concept exercise and not an actual attempt at de-extinction, which the thylacine would be. I just think they ruined. I think they shot themselves in the foot with the way they marketed that.
I think it was a case of they had to make it sexy to make it sell. Yeah, and that's what kind of.
And this same company is putting funds into active, real, extant conservation. By the way, red wolves is something that their technology has actually already helped with. And should be sung about. It's just that this is over. I think the bad marketing here has overshadowed everything. Because they have covered like the actual breakthrough. They have covered what these direwolves actually are. They've actually been very. When I actually dove into it for my creature feature last week, I actually found that they themselves have actually been very transparent on their website about what these direwolves actually are. But the marketing, which they are responsible for, has just it's completely buried the Red Wolf story, the actual truth behind the direwolves, and the scientific breakthrough. It's also completely seems to have sunk the story about that connection between the Red Wolves and the that tribe. I can't remember their name, unfortunately. But every good thing about this breakthrough has been completely swallowed by the marketing, and it's so unfortunate. So yeah, we're with you on that. So yeah. And our next comment on YouTube comes to us from Kelsey Watts Music, who says, I find it pretty mental that people need to be told to respect whales or and to keep their distance from them in 2025.
I'm not shocked by that in the slightest.
I'm not shocked, but I agree with him. It is mental that we actually need to be,
if we need to have
babied on that level,
if we need to have warnings on like
may contain traces of peanuts.
Exactly.
So it's what I bought them.
If we need to have a thing on a bag of peanuts that says may contain peanuts, you need to have a thing that says do not touch animals or do not do, because people are stupid.
People are, generally speaking, not people on the individual level so much, but people en masse. Generally speaking, they're like Homer Simpson with that cupcake that Bart's put the electric wires into. And he just keeps the whole episode just zapping himself on the same cupcake. Yeah. So that's that is all of our YouTube comments on that episode.
You got there in the end.
Yeah, I got there.
Started to lose focus.
Yeah, it's the direwolf migraines come back.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
So yes, that's our question for this week. You can get in contact with us to basically let us know your thoughts on your favorite Mongolian animal, and any other things you want to as well. You can put that in the comments on the YouTube video that you're watching, but you can also get in contact with us in a myriad of other ways. One is obviously through our Facebook or social media, so Instagram, TikTok, all of those different places, but also you can send us emails through our email address, which is the nathistorykcupboard@gmail.com. So Aaron, what do we got this week?
So we've got email from Big Pumba, Shane Gowers, who says, hey guys, Big Pumba here. Hope you're well. Took a week off writing in to give other listeners a chance to write in. I feel the cupboard has had a lot of Big Pumba lately.
No such thing.
I'll break this email down to 3 points. Direwolves, which Aaron is now regretting asking the question about because he gets a migraine every time he sees that word. I feel the actual extinct animal is a creature that I definitely wouldn't want to bump into whilst walking around the plains of America at the time. Awesome creatures in their own right. The colossal pups. Though I do agree that the science is truly awesome and there are a lot of pros to this type of genetics work, these misfits, is what I'll call them, just are exactly that. They aren't direwolves. Yes, I agree they do have some physical differences to grey wolves, but I feel that they needed a jazzy animal to create, so they did just that. They created something that hadn't existed before. Yes, they're not a direwolf. They are not a grey wolf. They are a misfit species because it simply doesn't fit anyway.
I can't believe it's not direwolf.
I can't believe it's not direwolf.
They're margarine.
They're never going to be released into the wild. They will never have a niche in an ecosystem. They're just created to say, "Oh, look what we did." Yeah, I think so. They're a proof of concept, basically. If they turn this technology into helping extant and recently extinct species, then I'll probably be less pessimistic about it, such as northern white rhino, passenger pigeon, etc. Well, keep your eyes peeled on what they are doing because this is all. Yes, this is stuff that they've spoken about, and it's stuff that they've spoken to us about in interviews.
Yeah,
in an interview. It is incredible science that I fear, like most incredible things, may fall into the hands of people who just see profits. Yeah, let's hope not. On to lighter things. I recently had 2 weeks annual leave and went on multi-adventures. birding, forest walks, and a Chester Zoo trip. All really nice. While at the zoo, I explored the new Africa section, which I have to
Supposed to be
say
quite good.
is the best section of any zoo I personally have been to, especially the mole rat habitat.
Oh, I didn't realize they had mole rats.
Well, he says see last photo, so we will be putting your photos up as we read this out. Whilst there, I had a truly great experience at the Jaguar House, where for me, locking eyes with such a powerhouse felt truly primal. My question is, as two guys who have worked in zoos, which enclosure layout in mind and species, what were the most challenging species to work with in terms of enclosure stimulation?
What, as in enclosure was bad or good?
Yeah, I think he means just that which species are the most challenging to work with in terms of like making an enclosure that stimulates them effectively. Right, I think so I think he means with enclosure layout in mind, and species, what were the most challenging species to work with in terms of enclosure stimulation? And my final point before I go, the attack on Gareth last week was heinous. I too am a dipperless man. Oh, this is because Jen was admitting that she'd seen dippers. I have not seen a dipper, and the attacks thrown at Gareth. So, as payback, I shall attach some pictures from the zoo, and as punishment, no tiger pics.
Very good. Thank you. So the world has balanced itself.
Have a great episode. Have a great week, everyone. Kind regards, Big Pumba.
Thank
you
very
so much for your email and for defending the defenseless.
It is on my list,
and the photos,
and I will get out there and I will get to see them. You know, the main reason why I haven't seen a lot of birds is I just get so many other things in the way that it usually has to be, you know, pushed out of the way.
It's true. Trying to breed wetters does take a lot of energy.
Anyway, what's your thought? I mean, my instant thought is chimps. That's probably the most challenging, like, animal when it comes to use of space, but also some of the easiest because their enrichment was super easy, and you could just pretty much give them anything, and they would enjoy it to some degree. You know, we used to get you get a cardboard box and you put like one tiny bit of food in there, but stuff it in amongst a whole wad of paper, and they would spend a lot of time just finding that one thing. Or we'd do a peanut in a wrapped up piece of cloth and soak it in oil, and that'd be good for their hands because it would keep their hands nice and supple. But they'd also spend ages sort of sucking the oil out or getting the peanut out, and you know, so doing stuff for them was really easy. But I'd say challenging, I don't know. It's like the enclosure design for those animals is relatively straightforward in some ways, but they can do a lot of damage to the stuff, so they can break things easily. So I don't know.
I've just realised that I've interpreted the question slightly wrong because I was trying to think of animals that I've actually been involved with.
Well, that's where I've gone with. That's the most intelligent animals.
No, as in like involved in the enclosure design and stuff. Because I've only been involved in the enclosure design for like only a very few of my animals. Because oftentimes as a zookeeper, when you arrive to work, everything's already, the infrastructure's there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would agree with you. Chimps, in some respects, they're very easy because they they're just naturally very curious and inquisitive. But also, I'd also say that they're very hard because you could very easily go wrong with something.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But that's an animal that I've worked with exceedingly briefly. Like, it's barely really even worth mentioning that I've worked with them. But it's just that I have some fun stories from working
They're
with them.
always interesting
They always
stories,
It's always close to my mind, close to my heart that I did get to work with them.
Do you know something that both of us have worked with that I think you might agree is one that is really challenging to give them something to do because they need to be mentally occupied. If it goes wrong, they can escape, and we've both seen it happen. But also one that if it's done properly, and I know that you and I both wanted to make better versions of this, is raccoons.
Yes.
They're incredibly intelligent animals, they will escape if you give them the chance because they're smart enough to realize how to do it.
You almost have to outsmart how these animals might think
Yeah.
about the what you've done for them. Like,
you remember all of the potential ideas that you, myself,
Shane, Drew,
and we all came up with these different ideas of things like fake bins and making it look like the back of a house and all these different ideas that we wanted to put in, but never really got off the design stage a lot of the time, which was a shame. And having an actual flowing river through their enclosure as well, which did eventually happen, but became really hard to manage, mostly because it was not put in correctly, I'd say. But
no, that's a good one. I will say one of the ones that I think is, and you and others may disagree with me on this, but I think this is 100% fitting, is actually grey wolves. They are so challenging to enrich because they're incredibly neophobic.
Yeah,
anything new is
terrifying.
Is a threat, a potential threat. This is why when, like, I always say in my wolf talks, like, if you go into the woods of the forest and you see or hear a wolf, you're exceedingly lucky, because most of the time you get within 2 to 5 miles of them and they've gone and they've told all their family about you and they're down that burrow and they're not coming back out. So getting it, for example, and a shout out to a friend of mine, Charlie Gent, for this, because he's the one that gave me this idea, and I'm not going to take credit for this. When we first started training the Hudson wolves, a collection that me and Gareth worked together, no one could get them to come close at this time. And what I did was, on several days, I went down there to their enclosure. I sat there for a while with a cardboard thing that I'd cut out of a cardboard box, and I basically made myself my own chessboard on it. And I had little bits of 2x2 inch chunks of meat as chess pieces, and I literally sat with my back to the enclosure and I played chess against myself with these meat bits. Every time I took a piece, I just tossed it into the enclosure, and after I think it was 3 or 4 days, I had all the puppies right up against the mesh just watching me, and the adults maybe a couple meters back, and that was a huge breakthrough for me.
How many games did you lose to yourself?
Every single one. But I also won everyone.
Well, there you go. That's the way to think of it.
So yeah, I would say wolves are especially challenging. I also find that there are so many opinions in wolves that it can make that quite difficult as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the most fun ones to do was being involved in a tiger enclosure being set up. That was awesome. I was towards the tail end of it being set up, to be honest, but still, it was nice to be involved somewhat in where that was going and what was going into it and stuff. That was really cool, very immersive as well. The final product.
Yeah, it's like I say, enclosure design is one of those things that I've always really loved. I've usually done it more from the small animal side of things, so reptiles, invertebrates, and fish, and you can get really sort of like creative with how you do things there. Like, do you know, actually I'm going to say that the one final one that I think is worth mentioning is trapdoor spiders. Really hard to display because, well, all you have is a enclosure of dirt with a hole that flips up. I tried putting in like fake burrows that they would try and get, but eventually they just web over the whole thing, and it's part of what they do. But you know, trying to show off invertebrates sometimes is the hardest thing because people just tend to walk straight past them. So whereas you can set them up to look really nice and really interesting, and if you ever go to any large or decent animal collection that's got a good invertebrate area, you'll see that they'll spend a lot of time setting them up to look really nice. Bristol's used to be one of the best ones for that, I'd say. Their invert house was amazing, the way that things were set up. They looked good. They were interactive in how they were set up. But it's usually an animal that people pass straight by very, very quickly. So it's more about grabbing people's attention. So there's different aspects to how you set up an enclosure. It's much easier with a large animal like a wolf that people are there to see.
Yeah.
You could have them in a big grass field, and most people would not care that much.
My on both of those points, the small animal point that you make, one of my favorite things to do is enclosure design for snakes and fish.
Yeah.
Because they're so small that their habitats, you can make a tiny pocket for relatively expense free, a tiny pocket of their natural. Forget all these coconut shells and all these the dinosaur skulls and the little castles and all that rubbish. Like, you can actually make a little pocket of a real world environment in your home, which is really cool. And
Chester Zoo, as he's mentioned, where he's been, has got some really fantastic exhibits for just the small stuff. So
to your second point with the larger ones, one of the most challenging things with the larger species is actually who you're working with and how much they support you. And that's all I'll say on that.
That's really cool. So
nice little trip down memory lane there.
Fantastic, and thank you for sending us that. And you know what, we need to go to Chester Zoo.
Yes, we do.
If anything, just to see the naked mole rats. Right, well, that nicely brings us to, I think, to our Patreons, where we're talking about other ways that you can support us on the podcast. So let's go to that.
Every week, we like to give a little love back by shouting out the names of our wonderful Patreon supporters.
That's right. These are the cupboard dwellers who are kind enough to support us through a monetary contribution, for which we are eternally grateful and grateful beyond words.
And those people are, of course, Fogtober, Jen Greenhall, Connie P, Chelsea McKee, Nick to Nick, Owen Cox, and Matt Geddy.
Guys, your financial contributions are actively helping us out here in the Natural History Cupboard in a myriad of ways, including developing our new studio, planning excursions and being able to go out and film on location, considering technical upgrades, and actually making the jump from a solely audio-based podcast to the now growing YouTube channel. And we really can't thank you enough for that.
Now, we appreciate all of our cupboard dwellers and the support you offer us through listening, liking, sharing, and subscribing. But if you feel we've earned it and you're considering joining our Patreon, there are two options through which you can do so.
That's the Nature Nerds and the Animal Ambassador tiers, which you can find on the Patreon website or links through our social media as well. And each one having different benefits for you to enjoy.
And now back to Gareth and Erin in the studio.
Massive thank you to our Patreons and all that you guys do. You really help us out and go that extra mile to be able to get us to do a huge amount of stuff for the podcast. So that pretty much brings us to the end of this week's episode. So massive thank you, Erin.
Thank you for coming back.
Turning up, I thought I would, seemed nice. And a massive thank you to you at home for joining us, and we'll see you next time here in the Natural History Cupboard. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so it's not Paraceratherium joke based, Erin, but here we go. It's rhino based.
Okay.
So to describe it as well, what do you get if you cross an elephant and a rhino?
Oh, I don't know.
You're thinking about it far too much.
Yeah.
If I know.
Yeah, that'll do.
Don't think about it too much.